Hi everyone, I'm going to very quickly tell you about two different versions of a tool called Deep Research, one offered by OpenAI and one by Google's Gemini, and then a product called NotebookLM that is also produced by Google. There's varying levels of access to deep research. It depends what version of either ChatGPT or Google's Gemini you have access to. In the case of Wesleyan, I might point you a little more towards Gemini because you have guaranteed access through your Wesleyan Google account. Deep research in both the ChatGPT as well as the Gemini cases are reasoning models. So if you think of very old chatbots, think back to like November 2022, they tended to think and then provide you with an answer right away. You could improve their performance by asking each chatbot to basically do sort of step-by-step thinking, what we call chain of thought prompting. And the newer chatbots do this automatically through what we now refer to as a reasoning model. So they sort of spell out their process, and as a result, they produce better output. And that's what these deep research tools are run on, is this sort of chain of thought prompting. So I tested both of these tools by asking them to run a report on a topic I knew something about, grade inflation. I actually had to write a report like this back in 2018 for Wesleyan. Here's the prompt that I put in, and I put it both into ChatGPT as well as Gemini, and then clicked the buttons that I highlighted there that both say deep research. And then they ran for about 8 to 10 minutes. So remember, chain of thought prompting. Here's what it looks like. I actually screenshotted it as it was appearing on screen. This is in Gemini. You see that it's sort of narrating out what it's going to do, and it's beginning to sort of pull resources from around the internet. Some of these URLs might make you kind of wince, like, that's really not a good source. But some of the other ones you might be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's getting somewhere that I might consider to be a quality resource. You see more of the sort of chain of prompt prompting in action there. And then you see that Gemini continues to expand out the sources from which it's pulling. Here's an example from ChatGPT in terms of what that chain of thought prompting sort of looks like. It's spelling out what it's doing, it's reasoning, and so forth. Here's what it looks like in ChatGPT. I was able to basically click a button that said export to PDF, and this is what it gave me. There are endnotes. These are hyperlinked, so you can go directly to the source. Sometimes deep research is able to actually get into an article. It sort of depends on what the paywall is. And other times it could just scrape some information from the abstract. It basically has all these subheadings, which I think are actually kind of helpful to think about the different sort of things you would want to address if you were writing this report for yourself. And I'm scrolling very quickly here, but you get a sense there's some tables, goes on and on and on. And again, you can slow down the speed of this recording if you want to look at it a little more carefully, or you can just visit this document in the Google Drive. I really want to highlight the end where it lists all the resources that it pulled on, and it also shows you how often it relied on each research or each resource. Here's the Google version. It's somewhat different. It really focuses on a lot of sort of concepts that are useful for thinking about the issue of grade inflation. You'll see there's these tables that do that over and over. And then what it does differently than ChatGPT is it sort of gives examples about how to run searches on your own for this particular topic. And then it has the resources at the end. Google NotebookLM is a very different kind of product. It relies on something called Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or RAG. And instead of going out into the web to get resources, it relies on the resources and materials that you upload to it. So RAG, what it does is it turns all the files that you upload into vectors so it can quickly find what matters in those files. And that allows it to give a summary that's probably more relevant. And theoretically, it's probably more fact-based too. It also is able to handle a tremendous amount of material. So I want to give you an example. This is my Google notebook, and you'll see within it, there are mini notebooks, and I've made one about grade inflation. And what I've done, and this is the interface for it, is I uploaded all the resources that I had used to write that original memo back in 2018. You'll see that in the interface, there is this left-hand sidebar for all of your source material. There is a chat window where you can basically put in a prompt like I put in for chat for deep research, and it'll then write the memo demo that I want. And it also has this studio feature that has some sort of pre-made prompts. You can ask for a briefing document, an FAQ, a study guide. You can also ask for an audio overview, which is essentially a podcast with two people talking that sound very, very real about whatever material you uploaded. I could imagine a student using Google Notebook in the following way. Maybe they're taking a course called Sociological Theory, and within that notebook, they are uploading all of the readings that you assigned as PDFs. Maybe you had them posted in Moodle, all their notes from class, some of the slide decks you may have used if you shared them with your students, and even things like links to videos from YouTube, which Google Notebook will also process to help them then consolidate everything that they're getting and help them learn the material. In theory, learn and not shortcut their learning, but that's going to be the tricky part. Can we get students to really think about those things in critical ways and how they're using these tools in ways that actually help them grow versus sort of keep them from growing at all? Here's some reading where you can learn a little bit more about all of these tools. And I also want you to keep in mind that although I'm showing you kind of what's so interesting about these tools, I want you to also be really worried about these tools. In the case of deep research, right now, it still has limited access to peer-reviewed journals. However, we predict that these tools and these companies will make contracts with various library databases and publishers, and that over time, deep research will be able to access a lot more research and be able to produce much better output. In the case of Google Notebook, your students have access to it. They had access before this year anyway with their private Gmails, and it is worth thinking about what it is that you feel comfortable having them upload. Do you want to talk to them about things you would rather not have them upload? How could these tools help them learn better? And when might these tools get in the way of that learning that we care so much about? Thanks for listening.